If you're over 60 and you wake up tired, your joints ache before noon, and your belly won't budge no matter what you eat, I need you to hear this. Your body isn't broken. It's running on the wrong fuel. And the fix might be sitting in a bottle in your grocery store right now for under $20. I'm Dr. Jada Lennox, longevity medicine specialist. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside your body when you add one specific ingredient to your morning coffee, and why the science behind it is some of the most exciting research in aging medicine right now. Stay with me, because what I'm about to explain will completely change the way you think about your morning routine. Your body after 60 is playing by completely different rules. Here's something most doctors don't take the time to explain. The way your body produces energy, repairs tissue, and burns fat at 60 is fundamentally different from how it worked at 40 or 35. It's not just slowing down. The underlying biology has actually shifted. Think of it this way. When you were younger, your body was like a brand new car engine. Efficient, responsive, powerful. After 60, that same engine is still running. But some of the key components are wearing out. The fuel system isn't processing energy the same way. The maintenance crew inside your cells is working with fewer resources. And the fuel you've been putting in your whole life, glucose, mostly from carbohydrates, isn't burning as cleanly as it used to. That's not your fault. That's biology. And that's exactly why what you put in your morning coffee matters more after 60 than it ever did before. So what is MCT oil, and why are longevity researchers so interested in it? MCT stands for medium-chain triglycerides. That's a type of fat, but it behaves completely differently from the fat in butter, olive oil, or the fat stored around your waist. Most dietary fats take a long, complicated journey through your digestive system before they reach your bloodstream. MCT oil skips all of that. It goes directly to your liver, and your liver converts it almost immediately into something called ketones. Now, ketones are not just an alternative fuel source. They are, and this is important, signaling molecules. They actually communicate with your genes. They tell certain parts of your body to switch into repair mode. And after 60, your body needs that signal more than ever. Let me show you exactly why. The 3 biological threats after 60. Let me be straight with you. When I talk to my patients who are 60 and older, I see the same 3 problems showing up again and again. Not because they made bad choices, but because these 3 things happen to virtually everyone after a certain age, and most people have no idea they're happening. The first one is mitochondrial decline. Your mitochondria are the tiny power plants inside your cells. Every cell in your body, your heart, your muscles, your brain, depends on mitochondria to produce energy. And here's the hard truth. By the time you reach 65, the density of your mitochondria has dropped by somewhere between 40 and 50% compared to when you were in your 30s. Half your power plants are either gone or barely functioning. That's why you feel exhausted doing things that used to be effortless. That's why recovery takes longer. That's why your brain feels foggy by 3 in the afternoon. Does that sound familiar to anyone watching this? The second threat is stem cell depletion. Your body has a built-in repair system. Stem cells that circulate through your bloodstream and patch up damaged tissue. Muscle, bone, organ lining, blood vessels. When something breaks down, stem cells show up and fix it. But after 60, the population of those circulating stem cells drops by 60 to 70%. Your repair crew has lost most of its workers. The third threat is metabolic dysregulation. After 60, your cells become less sensitive to insulin. Your body starts over-relying on glucose for fuel. And here's where it gets serious. That glucose-heavy internal environment is actually favorable for certain types of damaged and abnormal cells. Your metabolism isn't just slowing down. It's creating conditions that work against you. 3 threats, all happening simultaneously. And your morning coffee, with the right addition, can start addressing all 3 of them. How MCT oil bypasses normal fat digestion. Now let's talk about what makes MCT oil genuinely different from every other fat you've ever eaten. When you eat a piece of salmon or drizzle olive oil on your salad, that fat goes through a long process. It gets broken down in your small intestine, packaged into special transporters called chylomicrons, moved through your lymphatic system, then finally enters your bloodstream and travels to wherever your body decides to send it. The whole process takes hours, and a significant portion of that fat ends up stored, especially around the abdomen. MCT oil doesn't do any of that. The fat molecules in MCT oil are shorter than regular fat molecules. That's what medium chain means. They have a shorter carbon chain. Because of that shorter chain, they bypass the lymphatic system entirely and go straight to your liver through the portal vein. Your liver receives them within minutes of consumption and converts them directly into ketones. Now, not all MCT oil is created equal. The most powerful fraction is called C8, Caprylic Acid. It's the purest, fastest converting form of MCT. It produces the highest ketone levels in the shortest amount of time. When you're shopping, look for a product that's either pure C8 or C8 dominant. The cheaper blends contain mostly C12, lauric acid, which behaves much more like regular fat and produces far fewer ketones. So when I say add MCT oil to your coffee, I mean specifically C8. That distinction matters. Within about 30 minutes of drinking your MCT coffee, your liver has already produced a measurable rise in blood ketone levels. And those ketones, remember what I said earlier? They're not just fuel, they're signals. They start activating biological processes that your body hasn't prioritized since you were decades younger. What processes exactly? That's where it gets really interesting. Mechanism number 1 and number 2. Burning visceral fat plus rebuilding mitochondria. Let's start with the one everyone wants to hear about first, fat loss. But I want you to understand something before we talk numbers. Not all fat is equal. The fat under your skin, the kind you can pinch, is actually relatively harmless from a medical standpoint. The fat that concerns me as a longevity specialist is visceral fat. The fat packed deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your liver, your kidneys, your intestines. Visceral fat is metabolically active. It produces inflammatory compounds around the clock. It disrupts hormone signaling, it worsens insulin resistance. And after 60, it accumulates faster and resists conventional dieting more stubbornly than at any other point in your life. Here's what ketones do about that. When your liver produces ketones from MCT oil, those ketones travel through your bloodstream and activate specific genes, particularly ones that instruct your cells to switch their primary fuel source from glucose to fat. Your body essentially gets a signal that says, stop hoarding fat, start burning it. And it preferentially targets visceral fat first because that fat is most accessible to the metabolic pathways that ketones activate. One study published in the Journal of Nutritional Science and Vitaminology found that participants who consumed MCT oil daily showed significantly greater reductions in abdominal circumference compared to those consuming olive oil, with no other changes to their diet. Now here's what I find even more exciting than the fat loss. Mechanism number 2. Remember those mitochondria we talked about? The power plants that have been shutting down since your 40s? Ketones activate a protein called PGC1 alpha. Write that down if you need to. PGC1 alpha. Because this protein is essentially the master switch for mitochondrial regeneration. When PGC1 alpha gets activated, it sends a signal to your cells. Build new mitochondria. Not repair the old ones, build new ones from scratch. Think about what that means. You've spent 20 or 30 years gradually losing mitochondrial density. And here is a biological mechanism, triggered by something you drink in the morning, that can begin reversing that process. Now, I want to be honest with you, as I always am with my patients. This doesn't happen overnight. Mitochondrial regeneration is a slow process. We're talking weeks, not days. But the research shows it does happen. And for someone over 60 who is chronically fatigued, chronically foggy, chronically feeling like their body just won't respond the way it used to, that process starting is enormous. Your energy doesn't have to keep declining. That is not a fixed outcome. And that matters. Mechanism number 3, protecting your stem cell reserve. Let's talk about your repair crew. I mentioned earlier that stem cell populations drop by 60 to 70% after 60. That's a staggering loss. But before we talk about what MCT oil does here, I want you to understand why stem cells deplete so rapidly in the first place. Because the reason is something you actually have some control over. Stem cells live in specialized environments inside your body called niches. Bone marrow is one of them. These niches are like protective shelters. They keep stem cells in a dormant, preserved state until they're needed for repair. The problem is that chronic inflammation, high blood glucose levels, and oxidative stress all damage these niches. When the niche is damaged, stem cells either activate prematurely, burning through your reserve, or they simply die off without being replaced. What's causing all that chronic inflammation, high glucose, and oxidative stress in people over 60? In large part, it's exactly the metabolic dysregulation I described earlier. The same glucose-heavy metabolic environment that depletes your energy is also destroying the shelters your stem cells need to survive. Here's where ketones enter the picture. Beta-hydroxybutyrate, the primary ketone your liver produces from MCT oil, has been shown in research to directly reduce oxidative stress at the cellular level. It inhibits a protein complex called the NLRP3 inflammasome, which is one of the main drivers of chronic low-grade inflammation in aging adults. In simpler terms, ketones calm the inflammatory fire that's been damaging your stem cell niches. And when that inflammation decreases, the niches become more protective again. Stem cells stay dormant and preserved rather than burning out prematurely. Your repair reserve stops depleting as fast. Now, does drinking MCT coffee suddenly give you the stem cell population of a 30-year-old? No. Let's be realistic. But slowing the rate of depletion and improving the environment in which your remaining stem cells live is meaningful medicine, especially when you start early enough. Which is why I always tell my patients, don't wait until you feel terrible to start taking care of your cellular environment. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is this morning. Mechanism number 4, starving cancer cells. I want to talk about something that most wellness content completely avoids because it sounds scary. But I think you deserve to understand it, clearly, honestly, and without alarm. After 60, the risk of cellular abnormalities increases significantly. That's just biology. Your DNA repair mechanisms have had 6 decades of work, and they're not perfect. Abnormal cells appear in everyone's body. The question is whether your internal environment helps contain them or helps them thrive. Here's what the research tells us. Most cancer cells have a metabolic quirk. They are heavily dependent on glucose for energy. In fact, they consume glucose at rates 10 to 70 times higher than normal cells. This is called the Warburg effect, named after the German biochemist Otto Warburg, who first described it nearly a century ago. Cancer cells have largely lost the ability to efficiently use fat or ketones as fuel. They need sugar. Specifically, they need a glucose-rich environment to grow and replicate rapidly. Now think about what happens when ketones replace glucose as your primary fuel source. Your normal cells adapt beautifully, running efficiently on ketones. But abnormal cells that depend on the Warburg effect, they find themselves in an environment that doesn't support their energy demands. I want to be very clear here, and this is important. MCT oil is not a cancer treatment. It is not a cure. Anyone telling you otherwise is misleading you. But creating a metabolic environment that is less hospitable to glucose-dependent abnormal cells, that is a legitimate, research-supported concept in longevity medicine. And for someone over 60 who is already at elevated baseline risk, shifting your metabolic environment toward ketones rather than glucose is one of the most rational preventive strategies available. Mechanism number 5, preserving muscle while losing fat. Here's something that almost nobody talks about when discussing weight loss after 60, and it's something I feel strongly about as a longevity specialist. Losing weight is not the goal. Losing fat while preserving muscle, that is the goal. And the difference between those two things is enormous for how long you live and how well you function. After 60, muscle loss accelerates dramatically. The medical term is sarcopenia, the age-related loss of skeletal muscle mass. Sarcopenia affects your strength, your balance, your metabolic rate, and your ability to recover from illness or injury. It is one of the strongest predictors of mortality in older adults. Not heart disease, not diabetes, sarcopenia. And here's the cruel irony. Conventional calorie-restricted dieting, the kind most people attempt when they want to lose weight, accelerates muscle loss. When your body runs low on glucose and needs energy, it will break down muscle tissue to manufacture glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. You lose fat, yes, but you lose muscle alongside it. Ketones block that process. Beta-hydroxybutyrate has a direct anti-catabolic effect on muscle tissue. It suppresses the signaling pathways that trigger muscle breakdown during energy deficit. Your body, running on ketones, becomes far more selective about what it burns, targeting stored fat rather than cannibalizing muscle. For someone over 60 who is trying to lose abdominal weight, this is critical. You don't just want a smaller number on the scale. You want to lose the visceral fat, keep the muscle, and come out the other side stronger and more metabolically resilient than when you started. MCT oil, used consistently, helps create exactly those conditions. The caffeine and MCT synergy nobody talks about. I saved this one for last in the main section because I think it's genuinely underappreciated, even in clinical circles. We've established what MCT oil does on its own, but why specifically add it to coffee? Is that just a lifestyle trend, or is there actual biology behind the combination? There is actual biology, and it's elegant. Caffeine, the compound in your morning coffee, triggers the release of fatty acids from your fat cells. This process is called lipolysis. When caffeine enters your bloodstream, it stimulates your adrenal glands to release adrenaline, which in turn signals your fat cells to break down stored fat and release fatty acids into the bloodstream. Here's the problem. Those fatty acids are now circulating, but if you don't immediately use them for energy, your body reabsorbs and restores them. The lipolytic effect of caffeine is real, but its impact on actual fat loss is limited on its own because the free fatty acids often just get recycled. Now add MCT oil to that picture. The ketones produced from MCT oil shift your metabolic state toward fat utilization. Your cells are already primed to burn fat as fuel. So when caffeine simultaneously releases fatty acids from storage, those fatty acids don't get recycled. They get burned. The two work together in a way that neither fully achieves alone. There's also a cognitive dimension worth mentioning. Ketones cross the blood-brain barrier more efficiently than glucose. Your brain, which is responsible for roughly 20% of your total energy consumption, runs exceptionally well on ketones. Many of my patients over 60 report that their mental clarity within an hour of drinking MCT coffee is noticeably sharper than with regular coffee alone. That's not placebo. That's your brain getting a cleaner, more efficient fuel source at exactly the time of day when cognitive function matters most. So the combination isn't arbitrary. It's synergistic at the biochemical level. And for someone over 60 whose energy, focus, and metabolism all need support simultaneously, that synergy is genuinely valuable. So let's bring this all together, because I want you to really feel the weight of what we've just covered. One ingredient, added to a drink you're already making every single morning, and it simultaneously addresses 5 of the most destructive biological processes that accelerate aging after 60. It activates fat burning, specifically the visceral fat that's been silently driving inflammation inside your abdomen for years. It triggers mitochondrial regeneration, rebuilding the power plants your cells have been losing for decades. It protects your stem cell reserve, slowing the depletion of your body's own repair system. It shifts your metabolic environment away from glucose dependence, creating conditions less favorable to abnormal cell growth. And it preserves your muscle tissue while you lose fat, protecting the single most important physical asset you have for longevity. 5 mechanisms, 1 tablespoon, every morning. And here is what genuinely moves me about this. After years of working in longevity medicine, after seeing patients who felt like their bodies had simply given up on them, the timeline on this is real, and it is measurable. Within 2 weeks, most people report something they haven't felt in years. Mental clarity in the morning, sustained energy that doesn't crash by noon, a sense that their brain is actually awake. By 8 weeks, the metabolic changes become visible. Abdominal circumference decreases. Physical endurance improves. Sleep quality often gets better because the body is regulating energy more efficiently through the night. By 3 months, and this is the part that still genuinely excites me, the mitochondrial renewal process has had enough time to produce measurable changes. Blood markers improve. Triglycerides drop. Insulin sensitivity increases. The biological age of your cells by several key metrics begins trending younger. Not because of a drug, not because of an expensive procedure, because you changed what goes into your morning coffee. That is not a small thing. That is your biology responding exactly the way it was designed to respond, when you give it the right signal. So let's talk about exactly how to do this, because the protocol matters just as much as the ingredient. Start with pure C8 MCT oil, Caprylic Acid. Not a blend, not coconut oil, not the cheap mixed versions. Pure C8. Check the label before you buy. Begin with 1 teaspoon on your very first day. I cannot stress this enough. MCT oil consumed too quickly causes digestive discomfort, nausea, cramping, an urgent trip to the bathroom. That is not dangerous, but it is unpleasant and completely avoidable. Start small. Give your digestive system 1 week to adapt. Then gradually increase to 1 full tablespoon over the following 2 to 3 weeks. That tablespoon is your maintenance dose. Now, and this detail matters more than most people realize, do not just stir it into your coffee with a spoon. MCT oil and coffee don't mix on their own. You'll end up with an oil slick floating on top, and your body won't absorb it efficiently. You need to emulsify it. Use a small blender, a milk frother, or a handheld immersion blender. 30 seconds of blending creates a creamy, almost latte-like texture. That's the form your body can actually use. Drink it in the first hour after waking, on an empty stomach. And then, this is important, delay your first meal by 2 to 4 hours. That fasting window is what allows the ketones to fully activate the biological mechanisms we discussed today. 3 things to remember from today. First, your fatigue, your belly fat, your brain fog after 60 are not inevitable. They are symptoms of a metabolic environment you can actually change. Second, MCT oil works because it doesn't just feed your body, it signals your body. Ketones are messengers, and the message is repair, renew, rebuild. Third, consistency beats intensity every time. 1 tablespoon every morning for 3 months will do more for your biology than any crash diet or extreme protocol ever could. I want to hear from you. Have you tried MCT oil before? Did you notice a difference? Or did nobody explain to you why it actually works until today? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this video gave you something useful, something you're going to actually use tomorrow morning, please share it with someone over 60 who needs to hear it. And before you go, everything I've shared today is based on current research in longevity and metabolic medicine, and I stand behind every word of it. But your body is yours, and your health history is unique. Before making any changes to your routine, especially if you have diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or are on any medications, please talk to your own doctor first. This is education, not a prescription. Take care of yourselves, because you've earned it.